Welcome to the Key of Imagination. This week we're going to be looking at the Twilight Zone episode, A World of Difference. We'll try and untangle who's the real person here between Arthur and Gerald. We'll try and find a common theme that connects the two men, and I'll reveal to you my moment of awe. So, grab your keys, and let's open up this door to the fifth dimension.
You unlock this door with the key of imagination.
Arthur Curtis is in many ways quite typical. A spouse, a child, a job, with a nice little office though, and just trying to get through the working days so he can go on a much-needed vacation. Nothing disturbing, until someone suddenly yells, "Cut!" And all of a sudden, it melts away. Suddenly, Arthur finds himself on a movie set with lights, camera, and plenty of action. He's surrounded by people who claim to know him not as Arthur Curtis, businessman, but as Gerald Raigan, troubled actor. The more Arthur tries to explain that he doesn't know who this Gerald Raigan is, the more troubling things become. Gerald is not respected at his job. He isn't loved at home, and his only means of escape seems to come from a bottle. As Arthur sits in his office, or film set, he makes one final plea to please make Gerald go away and bring back the life he knew as Arthur Curtis. And his wish is seemingly granted. Arthur hugs his wife and whisks her away on that much-needed vacation. As for Gerald, well, he exists somewhere in the annals of time, or at least in the pages of a script entitled The Private World of Arthur Curtis. A World of Difference is directed by Ted Post. The teleplay is by Richard Matheson. And as for our cast, our leading men, Arthur Curtis and Gerald Raigan, are played by Howard Duff, who was also married to Ida Lupino from the 16mm Shrine. Nora Radin is played by Eileen Ryan, Brinkley is played by David White, and Marion Curtis is played by Susan Dorn. The episode first aired on March 11th, 1960. In Grams Jr.'s Unlocking the Door, he notes that the painting in the Raigan home is the same one used in Sturka's house in Third from the Sun, and in The Four of Us Are Dying. Now, apparently the stairway that Jerry runs down is also the same one used in Elegy. By the way, since we're talking art, how awesome would it be to have a painting from the Twilight Zone, or even one from Night Gallery? That would be absolutely amazing. Now, because of the rarity of them, however, I would probably donate it to either a museum or to the Rod Serling Memorial Foundation, so others can enjoy it. But I would definitely keep it for at least like a week. One glorious week. That's all I ask. I think that's fair. Now, as for my thoughts, this is a bit of an odd episode for me. Don't get me wrong, it's entertaining, and the idea of trying to find that line between sanity and insanity is always intriguing. But I almost felt like the twist ending made things more complicated than they really even needed to be. I suppose it does what Matheson wanted it to. It introduces the idea that Gerald Raigan is real, but in some ways, I think these kind of thoughts or ideas are better left for the audience to decipher. My problem with the episode is that the more you break it down and really analyze it, the more you become somewhat confused by the question of who's real and who isn't, which takes us into our first question. Question 1. Who is the real person here? Is it Arthur Curtis or Gerald Raigan? Now, I think on the surface we're supposed to believe that Gerald is the real person, and that the Twilight Zone has taken another lost soul looking to escape, a lot like Barbara Jean Trenton from the 16mm Shrine. We should recall that the twist ending here is that we see the script from the movie, and it's entitled The Private World of Arthur Curtis. This establishes for us that it's Gerald who is supposed to be the real version. However, I'm not so sure about that. I'm going to make an argument here, albeit probably not an incredibly successful one, for why I think Arthur Curtis is the real person and Gerald Raigan is the fake one. But in order to do so, we'll have to think about these terms, fake and real, and what they mean. We'll also have to call into question the integrity and purpose of Mr. Rod Serling when it comes to his role as narrator character, which we will do so respectfully. Of course. Serling points out the reality of the objects in the opening shot: a desk, a window, a light. He then tells us about how these things are real. And when it comes time for our lead character, he adds, "This is Arthur Curtis, age 36, who also is real." I'm getting better, right? No, I'm getting worse. All right, I'll keep trying. Okay, let's pause there for a moment and dissect this information a bit. Serling is telling us that Arthur Curtis is as real as any of the objects in the room. But what is this information actually revealing? If we're in our home or an office and someone asks us if the desk, window, and light are real, we would say, well, yeah. If we're on a movie or a television show set and we get the same question, what's our answer? Is a desk not a desk because of where it's located? How about the rest of the objects? Do you see what I mean here? Here's where philosophy starts to come in and muck things up. One of the more fascinating kind of quirks that I see in my students in Generation Z over millennials is that they're much more concerned about the question of reality. What is real versus what is fake? Let's think about this for a minute. Although both Gen Xers and millennials grew up with many of the modern social technologies that we have today, Gen Z is really the first one that is integrated from birth into what has pretty much become the standardized versions of social medias, including visual ones like TikTok. Again, it's not that Gen X and millennials didn't have access to these in some form. It's that I think Gen Z was really integrated into the standardization of social medias. Now, for those of us who come from generations prior to Gen Z, we still have memories of logging on to the internet and then logging off. My students always laugh when I talk about this, but gather round, children, and let Uncle Joe regale you with a story from the days of yore. Believe it or not, there was a time when the internet was a place that you entered and then exited. It was a destination, not a journey. That altered the way that those of us who still remember this sound still view the internet today. So we never had this mass problem of thinking about reality versus fantasy in a digital world to this level of extremeness. Although the people who were interacting on the internet were real, I don't think we thought of it as necessarily reality per se. My fellow older heads in the audience, help me out. I think you know what I mean here. Let me know in the comments. Now, that's not really the case anymore. People don't log off of the internet. The digital and the flesh have blended into one, which is why Gen Z, I think, struggles with the concept of reality. I mean, am I real right now? The me who is talking to you? Or is the real me off somewhere doing something else? Which one is the real version of me to you? Okay, why am I bringing this up? Serling is right, of course, that all of those objects he mentions, the desk, the window, the light, they're all real in the sense that we must acknowledge that they take up the normal 3 dimensions of length, width, and height, plus time. That gives them a sense of reality. When he says that Arthur Curtis is also real, he's acknowledging that Arthur is subject to those same laws of reality. This is where we need to take a longer look at Serling himself, because he adds to a bit of the confusion here as well. Now, at the end of each episode of The Twilight Zone, Serling would give a little anticipatory preview of the next episode. When it came time to preview A World of His Own, Serling describes the episode as follows: a unique and arresting story of a movie actor who finds himself on that thin line between what is real and what is a dream. Look, this of course sets people up to think of Raigan as the real person and Arthur Curtis as the fantasy. But you'll recall that in the introduction to the episode, he says that Arthur is real. So what is Serling doing here? And what does it tell us about Serling as a participant in the episodes and in reality? I think if we're reading Serling's character as narrator here, and it is in my opinion a character, I think it exposes that Serling himself is a kind of figure who resides outside of both our reality and even the created reality of the Twilight Zone. Now, for my Twilight Zone fans who are really in the know about the show, you're probably screaming, but, what about what happens at the end of A World of His Own? Not to be confused with our current episode of Focus, A World of Difference. Yes, absolutely, we can talk about that when the time comes. But for now, I still think that Serling, the narrator character, has a kind of transcendent omniscience that can see beyond how we understand the term reality, which is honestly pretty cool. It's why he can end the show by saying that there are other ways for a man to exit from life. Take the case of Arthur Curtis. His departure was along a highway with an exit sign that reads, "This way to escape. Arthur Curtis, en route to the Twilight Zone." Again, Serling, the narrator character, focuses on the existence of Arthur, not Jerry. It's Serling, the marketer, the man who tells us in the preview that Jerry is the real person. So who do we listen to? The marketer or the omniscient character narrator? So where does all this leave us with our question? Who is the real person? Well, here's where we can make a quick stop over to the philosopher Descartes and talk about reality. If you've heard the name Descartes, you might also have heard his most famous idea, "I think, therefore I am." Now, what the heck does that mean? Okay, Descartes' story of how he got there is fantastic, and it even includes a demonic evil genius. Yes, you heard me right. So I encourage you to check out that, storyline or some articles or videos that talk about Descartes in reality. But essentially, it all comes down to this. We usually know the existence of things through our sensory interactions, but they can be manipulated and we can be fooled. However, if I am being fooled, then I still must exist, even if I'm wrong in my thinking about everything. If I think, then I am. I exist. Now, even if we want to grant that Arthur Curtis only exists within the pages of the script that is left behind, we know that he is a thinking being because he decides that he and his wife have to get the heck out of Dodge. We know that he exists because Serling, the narrator, the omniscient being who places the thoughts within Arthur's mind, interacts with him, even if only through speech and narration. And therefore, Arthur Curtis is the more real person. Question 2. Is there a common theme that links the lives of both Gerald Raigan and Arthur Curtis? When I watched the episode the second time with the intention of looking for clues for the first question, something else hit me at the very end of the episode that prompted this second one. A theme emerged that connected both Arthur Curtis and Gerald Raigan, and it has actually somewhat altered the way that I view the story. We spend the majority of the episode in the shoes of Arthur Curtis, but we're seeing the life of Gerald Raigan. It doesn't take long before we start to realize that Jerry has an unfortunately terrible existence. He's under a lot of pressure at work, he has a failing marriage, and everyone in his life is depicted as wanting something from him, which means he has no real healthy relationships. If we remove the Twilight Zone from this story, we have a fairly straightforward tale of a man in a desperate need to escape from his misery. And in order to do so, he does what, unfortunately, many people do. He turns to alcohol, to a chemical escape. Now that's all fairly obvious, right? But think about it for a second. When we're introduced to Arthur and his life, what is he doing? He's talking to his secretary about what? Vacation. A very common form of escape for many people. Additionally, at the end of the episode, when Arthur is fully back in his existence with his wife and child, what does he immediately want to do? Escape! To go on vacation, even earlier. That is what links both Arthur Curtis and Gerald Raigan, the need to escape. So let's talk about that for a moment. Let's bring in some peer-reviewed research to really cement the concept of escapism. I found a fascinating article by Juki and Oksanen entitled "To Get High or to Get Out, Examining the Link Between Addictive Behaviors and Escapism." In this article, the researchers want to take a closer look at any potential links between addiction and the yearning to escape. What they found through their study is quite interesting. They write, "The concept of escapism constitutes an important contribution to the addiction debate by diverting attention from the desired end state of any particular addictive behavior and focusing on the anxieties modern individuals experience. From the escapist perspective, one does not engage in addictions to get high, but rather to get out." Okay, you might be thinking, once again, academia is informing us of something that we already knew intuitively. Excelsior! Well, yes and no. What the researchers learned through their study is that there are key differences between drinking or taking drugs to reach what many might deem as a positive state of euphoria, the way that we put in the article is taking drugs to get high, versus drug use or excessive alcohol use to specifically escape from what the individual might deem as a miserable life. The distinction is actually really important, because when it comes to addictions, you often have to find out what is at the root cause of it. If you can't get at that root cause, you're unlikely to help bring about the necessary healing. When we think of Gerald's life in the episode, his wife hates him, and maybe for good reasons. People at work clearly do not respect him, and we can actually see how his drinking can make it difficult for them. And he seemingly has no positive relationships. The best he gets in the episode is genuine pity. I think the source of his drinking here is probably fairly self-evident. But what about Arthur? What about his need to escape? The more I wrote about this episode, the more I started to see even the life of Arthur Curtis as potentially problematic. After having gone through the entire ordeal that he just went through, his first thought isn't to get help or to talk to his wife about what he has experienced. It's to escape. Now, granted, we've been talking about escape in a very negative way, and vacations are actually quite positive. In fact, I did some research there as well, and I learned that there's a whole body of research called respite studies. Yes, respite studies. How awesome is that? And of course, I found in the research by Kuhnel and Sonnentag that besides enabling relief of negative consequences of work, vacation and other respites enhance positive states at work, such as effort expenditure. So even the employers benefit from employees taking vacation. And yes, if you need to, you can look at my citation and bring that to your boss. I don't think vacation has to always be viewed as an escape. It can simply be a great way to revitalize a person's relationship with the human experience and maybe even reconnect a bit with family and friends or even oneself. I think that the potential problem is when it is considered a form of escape. Because like the study I mentioned in the section on Jerry and alcoholism, we're not getting to the source of the problem. I have a terrible suspicion that this is what's happening with Arthur as well. I think we're supposed to have a kind of Frank Capra, It's a Wonderful Life kind of feeling at the end of the episode with Arthur taking over. But it doesn't really feel that way for me. Even in the best of situations of life, there's still plenty of strife, sadness, and difficult moments. What will happen to Arthur when those moments come up? I wish I could say that I felt good about it at the end, but I don't. I can only wish him the best of luck. Question 3. What are your moments of awe? As for my moment of awe, Arthur is, I think, who Jerry was always supposed to be, who we're all supposed to be. Someone who is loved, someone who finds balance and purpose in our labor, someone in a good enough state of mind that they can stop and take a moment in the day and just smile. But that doesn't seem to be the reality today. In truth, many people feel probably a lot like Jerry, trapped with a constant sense of dread. But maybe it doesn't have to be that way. I used to teach a section from Henry David Thoreau's journal dated May 6, 1854, and I would make my students analyze the following quotation. "It matters not where or how far you travel, the farther, commonly the worse, but how much alive you are." Now, this is not a particularly difficult quotation to analyze, but it is a difficult one to put into practice. We tend to carry our miseries wherever we go, whether it's to work from home or to home from work. And we can take vacations, but we can certainly bring our miseries with us there as well. Trust me, I've been guilty of that one myself. You can't trap joy or happiness in a bottle, nor should you. Those are meant to be experienced and then released back into the ether of the human condition. But can you bring contentment with you? Can we trap that? Can we bring with us the mindset that the entire world around us is made up of atoms, all arranged just for us to experience, and that the particles around you right now will never be the same ever again? And don't start with me, you atomic physicists out there. Keep your magical math to yourselves for a moment. Here's my moment of awe. Contentment travels well. Contentment allows you the opportunity to address sadness and to be open to joy. Wherever you go after you finish listening to this episode, I want you to bring contentment with you. Just try it out. Take a moment, look around you, and say, I'm okay with being here in this moment right now. I don't have to be happy or sad. I can just be. And that's okay. The rating I give this one is middle-lower tier. The concept is interesting, but that twist ending, I still actually think it removes us from the Twilight Zone more than it establishes it. Still, I like it enough that I would watch it if it came on during a marathon, but if I needed to get something to drink or eat, I would probably use this episode to do so and not feel like I'm missing anything too important. Next time, we'll be taking a look at the episode Long Live Walter Jameson, and here are your questions to consider as you watch. Question 1. How, if at all, does this episode differentiate cowardice from fear? Question 2. Is Professor Kittredge correct? If a man lives forever, he does not grow wiser. And question 3. What are your moments of awe? Well, that's another episode in our life script. The very public world of Joe Meyer as he tries to explain his interest in the Twilight Zone without sounding like he's rambling and confusing others. Okay, that's just like the working title, but you get the gist of it. I hope that I've given you at least a few ideas to think about throughout the rest of your week. Now, I do have a quick announcement before I get to the comments. So a couple of people have reached out to me about kind of meeting up for Serling Fest, and I think that's absolutely awesome. That's exactly what I want. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make a short video, okay, where I'll kind of talk through my mindset of how I want to set up that kind of community or that atmosphere at Serling Fest, because there are a couple of things that I definitely want to see. Like I want to see Tom Elliott's presentation that he's going to be giving at 2:30 on Saturday, and I got to go back over the schedule again. But there's a couple of other things that I want to kind of hit up while I'm there. But I also do want to make some time to be able to meet some of you and just say hello, okay? Just kind of get to know a little bit the people on the other side of this camera here. So be on the lookout for a really super short video where I'll kind of talk that through a little bit. I have a couple of comments that I want to highlight from the YouTube channel. Actually, I particularly want to highlight a conversation that all of you had regarding my hypotheticals from the Twilight Zone question for the mirror image episode. If you're not familiar with this, I post a trivia question, a hypothetical question, and a Guess the Twilight Zone question for each episode on the community page of the YouTube channel and on X. That week's question had to do with if you entered a room, like a party or something, and everyone told you that you had already been there and spoken to them, how would you react? Would you turn internally first and think something was wrong with you? Or would you look externally and think someone was doing something to you? The answers were fantastic. I absolutely love the way that this community engages these questions. Here are just a few answers, but I thought they all were really great. JRod112278 responded, "Mine would be that there's something wrong with me, which is why gaslighting is so powerful." Fripp9822 offers, "Everyone else, considering I have a pretty good memory. I guess my first thought would be that I'm being recorded or pranked. If they actually had proof, like an image, that I've interacted with them before, I would question myself. which is not particularly hard to pull off these days with AI, but that's another topic. Kimberly9608 said, I think something was wrong with all of us, but the cause was affecting me differently. Absolutely fantastic answers, everyone. I love it when the community runs the gamut and thinks about it from a whole bunch of different angles. The conversations we're having are really starting to become something special. So keep them up, keep talking with each other, keep engaging with each other. It's absolutely fantastic for me to see. Head over to thekeyofImagination.com to continue our conversation. You can rate this episode, learn more about me, watch previous episodes of the show, and check out my Curios page where I showcase some of the Twilight Zone trinkets I've bought over the years. I encourage people to email me thoughts and comments, whether it's about a particular Twilight Zone episode, your rating for an episode, or about the Key of Imagination show. You can get those to me as a text email, an audio clip, or even a video clip of roughly no more than 5 minutes to keyofimaginationsshow@gmail.com. Keep in mind, even though we talk about some serious topics, we're trying to maintain as family-friendly of an atmosphere as we can. If you would rather I not use your comments on the show, please indicate that so I can respect your decision. If you enjoyed the show, I ask that you please take one moment and do one of the following to help build our community. Rate the show, review the podcast, leave comments, thumbs up, all of the usual algorithmic gymnastics that will help get the show in front of more people and help us build our community of Twilight Zone fans. However, even if you do none of that, and you absolutely hated every minute of this, I would still like to thank you for spending some time with me. Until next time, remember, all doors are open to those who possess the key of imagination.